All right. So apologies in advance. Not the best looking slideshow in the world, but pretty good at talking. So that's where I specialize more than anything is kind of digressing that. And that's essentially what we're going to do. We're going to call this Weekend Wednesdays. The ultimate objective here is to look at this past weekend, look at the future weekend, and see what we can kind of tie together and essentially like what could the market be missing that we could be picking up on, how we can utilize that for prediction strike and other sources. And hopefully you will find this helpful. And if not, so be it. All right, let's get into it with weekend reactions, or weekend Wednesdays, if you will. So, Jackson and Grant are my co hosts with me here, and we're going to go through each of the games and kind of some general gist. Some games are probably going to go a little bit more in depth than others, and that's fine. And yeah, all right. On to the first one, we have the Cowboys versus the Eagles. I mean, the biggest takeaway that I take from this specific game was that Dak Prescott quite literally just said that like once Jalen Carter got thrown out of the game, they kind of pivoted their game script. In which case they're like, all right, we're going to feed Javonte Williams the ball a lot more than we were expecting to, and that makes sense considering like Jalen Carter's no part of the game. So I think it's a pretty good spot to be buying the dip on someone like George Pickens. In reference to AJ Brown, I know a lot of people are concerned about him. I just think that he was dealing with a hamstring injury in his camp, and it could be a pretty good buy low opportunity. But I am concerned about the potential Dickerson injury. But I think you guys have a little bit more insight on that. What do you guys like about this specific game, or any specific notes that you guys have?
Yeah,
I mean, obviously the pass catching from the Eagles was a bit of a scare, but I think you kind of know what you're getting into when you're in the AJ Brown business. Like he's obviously going to have some big games and then some games where he kind of ghosts and looks disinterested. So I wouldn't give up on him fully, but this was definitely not the kind of debut you wanted to see if you picked him in the second round of a draft. I thought Dak looked great. I thought CD looked great, and the fact that this seemed like almost a floor week because of the drops he had, didn't get into the end zone, felt great, and I don't think you'll ever see drops like that from a guy of his caliber again. Pickens is going to be boomer bust. Javonte Williams, I actually thought looked pretty good. It'll be something to just keep an eye on to see what the Jaden Blue role looks like as the season goes on. But Miles Sanders is a non-threat, so as long as it's just those two, I think Javonte Williams is the guy you should absolutely be starting.
Yeah, I was going to mention Javonte as well, and I agree with you, Wells, on AJ Brown. Like he still ran a lot of routes. He might have been a step behind, but he was close to a normal, like around 90-something% snap share that you would expect of AJ Brown. So I think he's a good spot for a rebound if you want to buy low on him in fantasy. Jake Ferguson also saw a lot of action despite seeing only 77% of the snaps. And I think, that's just going to be a big target, someone I drafted in a couple leagues. So I look for, increased productivity from Jake Ferguson going into the future, at least in my opinion.
All right. On the next one here, we have Chiefs versus Chargers. Biggest kind of notes here is that Hollywood Brown is just the guy in the Chiefs offense without Xavier Worthy in the short term here. We're going to be without Rashee Rice for a little bit of time as well. So Hollywood is kind of the primary focus. Hopefully, you got him off the waiver and should be projecting really well for each week. We'll kind of see how he progresses from there, but ultimately, he was the biggest kind of note for this game. A lot of people are very interested in Quentin Johnson after the spike week he had. I'm not particularly sold by it, but that's just kind of my 2 cents. I also don't really think that this is going to stick for Marion Hampton in terms of like the true snap share he's going to have. I do think that Harris will be a thing eventually, not like in terms of like a massive role, but will have some sort of role. I just think it was tempered because, well, he's just coming back from injury essentially, so he didn't have a lot of condition. What say you guys about this specific game?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest takeaway was probably just how split the target share was for the Chargers in a lot of ways. I mean, you saw Keenan, Quinton, and Ladd both all go over 7 targets in this one. Ladd with 9 targets obviously didn't make the most out of those. He had a somewhat disappointing day, still was super passable in full point situations and stuff, but I think you would have liked the role to be a little bit more. It seemed like Keenan kind of ate some of those targets away a little bit. I think it's probably one where you don't want to overreact too much, but my biggest takeaway is that it seems like the Chargers are letting Herbert kind of have his way and kind of run the offense a little bit more, which is exciting if you have any pass catchers from the Chargers side of things. I think Amarian Hampton will still have his day and will still be a very valuable asset in fantasy, but I really like the way that Herbert approached this game and just kind of looked to attack with finding a variety of pass catchers. And I think all of those guys you could even find or use as a viable flex option in deeper leagues, particularly Keenan and Ladd. It felt like their roles were more sustainable.
Yeah, I'd pretty much just echo what you guys said. I mean, it's only been one game, so you can't take away a ton, but I'd say I'm a little bit wary of just like the Chargers, particularly actually just kind of everybody from a fantasy perspective. Just like, I agree with Wells that Najee is probably going to come and take a lot more of those snaps and carries from O'Marion as the season progresses. Will Disley, Conklin shared snaps, basically the receivers again. So I think it's going to be pretty inconsistent. It seems like they're putting an emphasis on spreading the ball. It's great for the Chargers, maybe a little bit sketch for fantasy.
All right, on to the next one here. We have the Buccaneers versus the Falcons. I mean, biggest takeaway from here is that, like, I think you could honestly sell high on Igbuka if you really wanted to, just because, like, people are going to overreact to week one because of his performance. His expected fantasy points were a lot less than his actual fantasy points, but ultimately he is still a very good player that is very exciting, so I don't mind if you hold him as well. If anything, that's kind of interesting to me is like the amount of snaps that Casey Washington had. If Darnell Mooney or Drake London ever were to miss time, it is clear that he is going to be the biggest benefactor here for whatever reason, which is just an odd thing. Aside from that, what do you guys have about this game?
I mean, Egbuka obviously looked great. That was kind of lived up to the hype that we gave him going into the season. I think a lot of people reached on him in drafts, or at least thought that they had reached, but it seems like he's probably the guy that I think can even sustain this when Godwin is back. If he continues to play this well, I think they'll be mixed in, and he might only be used in 3 receiver sets to some end. But even Sterling Shepard found his way into 6 targets in this one, so I think all of these guys will potentially be able to eat. I think a lot of people were a little bit down on Bucky Irving's game just because he was super inefficient, but it seemed like he was being run in a lot of situations where the Atlanta defense was kind of ganging up on the run and was able to get out in front of it. I think his snap share and the amount of carries he received were super appealing going forward. I wouldn't read too much into the efficiency. That'll be there. He'll start breaking some runs, and even 4 targets in the pass catching game. So I'm still just as high on Bucky as I was going in. And I think, it's kind of just confirmed your thoughts that multiple receivers in this offense can still eat even without Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I'd pretty much agree with you there especially about the concerns with Bucky. Any concerns overblown. Like Rashad, I mean, he got 14 snaps, but he ran routes on 9 of those. Like Rashad isn't going to be taking any of the run share away from Bucky, though. So I still think he's super solid. Other than that, I think you guys touched on what I would have.
All right. On to the next one here, we have the Bengals versus the Browns. I mean, Bengals just offensive line is abysmal, clearly, and the defensive front is amazing on the Brown side of the ball. So I definitely think that's an area of interest. In reference to the receivers, Tillman and Fannin were second to Jerry Jeudy in terms of first rate, which I thought was particularly intriguing. And clear that like Harold Fannin is going to have a very large role in this offense as seen by his targets and just overall touches he had in this game. Very exciting kind of future for him. Just more of a question of like, well, how live can this offense actually be, and how long will Joe Flacco be at the helm? What do you guys have on this game?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, I think Dylan Sampson is definitely a waiver wire ad, at least for the next couple of weeks. He could be good. He did see slightly less snaps than Jerome Ford. I expect that to pretty much completely flip this coming week, though, based on what we saw. It was a lot of pass catching, but I think they might want to try to at least experiment with Sampson a bit more, see if they can get some more work from him, as just a standard running back.
Yeah, I think even once Judkins comes in, Judkins will get a ton of work on the ground, which will probably help the offense as a whole, as he will be their best pure rusher. But Dylan Sampson will still have a role in the passing game. I don't know how fantasy relevant he will be in that role, but I mean, with 8 targets, I think he'll still be used a decent amount. And if he gets anywhere near that amount of target share, it's still a guy worthy of picking up. Obviously, Harold Fannin Jr. is a guy everyone's freaking out about. Had a great game. Definitely worth picking up. Probably would like to see it for another week or two, but I think especially in the possibility that Njoku is not on this team at the end of the year, that Fannin has an opportunity to kind of just soar in this offense as long as Flacco's the quarterback. Seems to love tight ends in this offense. Bengals side of things, I feel like it's kind of just a wash. It was a bad performance. They didn't really look in sync at all, even though a lot of them did play in the preseason, which seemed like kind of their issue in the past. But yeah, it just looked a little bit out of whack. I mean, Chase only getting 5 targets did not look like the guy you're accustomed to seeing. I would pretty much just write off this whole week from their pass catchers. There's no way it looks this bad going forward.
Is this actually accurate that Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy had the exact same snap share, routes run, targets?
Yeah.
Whoa, that's crazy. But I would say, I mean, Noah Fant might be a good pickup too. I mean, we saw how much Gesicki was used by Burrow last year. So, like, if he starts to assume more of a larger role there, and it kind of that 50% target share relative to or snap share relative to Gesicki's 30 kind of hinted that might be the way things are going with the Bengals. So something to look out for. Maybe not an ad quite yet, but.
You went on mute again, Jackson. All right. On the next one here, we have the Colts versus the Dolphins. The biggest thing I want to take away from this game isn't so much the usage. It's more so that, like, it turned into a blowout quickly. So, like, I don't think we can really use this as the strongest sample of being like, oh, the Dolphins are guaranteed to be absolutely abysmal. I'm curious to see if there is a game where they're competitive and kind of see what happens there, which we might see in week 2. At least that's what the current spread is indicating between them and New England, which they are a short favorite. Maybe a small dog, but one or the other. It's basically a 50-50 kind of game in theory. So I'm a little bit intrigued here. I like that Jalen Waddle essentially was considered to be the wide receiver 1 in terms of, like, usage from what we're kind of seeing from an advanced rate or advanced analytics perspective. Devon Achane, prior to them getting blown out and, like, blowing out all the starters, had like a 90% plus snap share. So he could be somebody to really buy low on, just because people are going to be like, oh, Miami sucks. I hate them, whatever it may be, whatever Jackson's yelling in the mirror as he talks about his favorite team. But, like, realistically, the Dolphins could be very fun when it comes to, like, someone like Devon Achane, or they could be an offense you don't want. But I'd rather kind of be a little bit more aggressive in terms of, like, well, maybe the market's wrong when it comes to someone like Achane. But the Colts look good. I think it's kind of the short summary there. Josh Downs coming back from a hamstring injury as well. I think that's going to definitely play into why he had a little bit less of usage. But it should condense to Pittman and Warren from at least what we saw in week 1. But I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about it.
No, I'd say the same. I don't want to, take too much from the Dolphins' first game, because it was just a horrible showing. And they kind of just gave up towards the end of that game. But it was nice to see guys like Malik Washington and Nick Westbrook-Ikine get some run, because I think if the Dolphins are actually decent at some point this year, they're gonna have to rely on the guys they have behind Waddle and Hill, just based on the injury history with those two. But yeah, I'm not going to take much from the Dolphins. Colts look great. Pittman, I'd say owners should be pretty excited about how he looked, or at least the volume he got right off the bat from Daniel Jones. Like, that was, like, for me, Pittman was, like, in drafts, I didn't really touch him. I didn't know how viable he was going to be in the Jones offense, so that was good to see.
Yeah, I'd be a little bit worried about Josh Downs, I guess, but also with the game script and how this one played out, they didn't really need to throw the ball down the stretch, and they were kind of just pounding the rock on the ground. I did like the way Tyler Warren was involved. I think that was super exciting. Daniel Jones looked good. Yeah, kind of trying to take it with a grain of salt, but I mean, it does make sense given that he had a year to work with KOC in Minnesota, and I even like Shane Steichen a lot as a coach and an offensive mind. So I think he's kind of just in a good spot. I wouldn't be shocked if he replicates this every few weeks and is kind of a consistent guy you can play in fantasy. Dolphin side of things, hard not to overreact, but I'm going to try my best not to and give the guys another week. I honestly thought Jalen Waddle looked really good. He found himself open in a lot of situations. He just wasn't receiving the ball. Tua couldn't get it out quick enough. And if this team has anything about them, they will address that and try to make some changes as they go up against New England this week.
All right, on to the next one here. We have the Raiders versus the Patriots. I mean, it just seems like Kayshon Boutte seems to be the guy. At least can't really tell if he's actually going to be good or not. So we'll kind of see how that we expand on that with 4 more weeks. I like Trayvon Henderson's usage a lot more utilized in the receiving game, so his floor is going to consistently be high. So when he actually gets a much larger role, he's just going to be a dominant monster for fantasy. Aside from that, I think Hunter Henry's a good waiver wire tight end to have. Jacoby Myers was a pleasant surprise. Not somebody that was a focal point for me, but that was mainly because I was kind of more concerned about Brock Bowers just being like something we've never seen at the tight end position before. But curious to hear your guys' thoughts here. I'm sure Grant will have a few things to say about his Raiders, so we can get a deeper level of insight.
Yeah, it's not great for fantasy purposes on the Raiders front, just based on how they split up the targets. They're probably also not going to throw the ball as much as they did in this one going forward. But Jacoby getting 10 targets and Brock Bowers getting 8, I guess, is a good start. They definitely mixed up the ball elsewhere, though. You saw like 7 different receivers catch a pass. Trey Tucker caught a touchdown. Deontay Thornton made a couple big chunk plays. So I definitely wouldn't. It's hard to make a rash judgment right now on who the second receiver in this offense is going to be and whether they have any fantasy relevance. I think that's going to take a couple more weeks. But it's nice to see that Brock Bowers and Jacoby can still get a huge amount of targets even in that situation and both be super fantasy relevant. Genty wouldn't overreact too much. The volume was great. He was out there for almost all of the game, which is great. That's kind of what you want to see now. It's rare to see something like that in the NFL. So I would give him a couple more weeks, let the offensive line figure it out a little bit, and I think there'll be a better scheme to get him some more chunk runs.
Grant, could you explain why Bowers only saw 50% snap share? I didn't really.
He's missed the fourth quarter and like some extra time.
Got you.
I mean, I think that's probably it. That's the only reason Michael Mayer at a higher percent. They did run a lot of 2 tight end sets, and there were a couple plays like in clear running downs. Brock Bowers is going to be on the sideline, and you're going to have a more blocking tight end in the game. So pretty much just that. I mean, he's out there in any situation where the ball is ever going to be thrown. So, yeah, just kind of something you can gloss over.
Word. Yeah, I pretty much don't have anything to add from what you guys said.
All right, on to the next one here. We have the Cardinals versus the Saints. I think the Saints might be a fun underdog in week 2, but we'll get to that once we get to them. They honestly just kind of performed a lot better than what I think the market's expecting. I think what we're going to have a lot of people saying is that, like, oh, it was Kyler Murray flu game, whatever it may be. And that very well could be true, but I don't know. I don't think the Saints were that bad. They kept the game a lot closer than what the market expected, so we'll see how they progress. I think the biggest news here is just Juwan Johnson's overall snap share and usage of this offense. He could just be a very boring but like good, consistent tight end play to have in your flex spot. But the James Conner and Trey Benson split was also very interesting to see them give him that much usage. The snap share is clearly very different between the two. But I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this specific one.
I'm definitely interested in seeing more of how the Saints team shakes out. Like Brandon Cooks actually saw a decent amount of snaps, which could be kind of fun later in the season, considering like Chris Olave and how often and hard he gets hit. Other than that, yeah, I was, I think the splits in general on the Cardinals were kind of interesting. Like seeing such a low snap share from Greg Dortch is a lot different than last season. Just a couple people moving up the ladder, moving down. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much touched on what I would have said.
Yeah, agreed. I was kind of pleasantly surprised with Spencer Rattler in this game. I mean, I don't think he was like a world beater by any means, but he was able to deliver the ball in a timely manner in the right spot to Juwan Johnson and Chris Olave a lot, which excites me about their prospects going forward. 2 guys I'm eyeing. Cardinals offense, I mean, we'll touch on some matchups in a bit. I like their spots heading into week 2. The running backs in particular, receivers don't have as good of a matchup. But I do think that it was at least nice to see Marv kind of start off the year on a high note, so you can just kind of get your hype up if he's on your roster and think highly of him going forward. I think he'll have a solid season for sure.
All right.
Do we think based on that running back split, it's a decent sell with that receiving touchdown in the first game, James Conner? Like, would you be looking to shop him at all?
I don't think so. I think as long as he's healthy, it's probably his job to lose, and he still looked good. Trey Benson did a good job running the ball down towards the end of the game when they were kind of just running out the clock, it seemed like. So, I mean, I think in games like that where the game script is super positive, they're ahead, you'll see both guys get some work. But in a game where it's kind of neutral, I would still expect Connor to get the majority of the work.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of where I was at. All right, on to the next one. We have the Panthers versus the Jags. Biggest takeaway here is that Trevor Lawrence might just be a genuine bust. He was going against like the worst. I think you could just say that Panthers might have the worst defense in the league. They faced like zero pressure whatsoever, and Trevor Lawrence just did not perform in a nuclear fashion like he should have here. Aside from that, though, T-Max usage was great. I just don't think the Panthers played to the zenith, at least offensively, like they should have. They should have played a lot better. And I think they could be a fun buy low spot potentially. But that we'll digress a little bit more into that later. Only comparable receiver that they current or like semi-prominent receiver that they have is T-Mac at this point in time, in my opinion. I expected a little bit more usage for Rico Dowdle, to be completely transparent. Did not get that. Travis Hunter's usage was great, but like I think this game script could have gone a lot differently. Etienne was great in kind of the short term here, but I think with the loss of Tank Bigsby, we're probably going to be seeing a lot more Bashal Toot and hopefully get involved over time here. LaQuint Allen is clearly the guy that they do like in pass protection, though, which makes sense from his college profile. But what do you guys say on this one?
Yeah, I think Bashal owners should be excited just with Tank Bigsby leaving. Etienne being who Etienne is. I mean, he looked decent with his rushing in the last game, but I don't think that's going to persist throughout the season. Other than that, yeah, no, don't think I have much to add for this one. I mean, the Panthers suck.
I like Etienne a lot. I think some of that burst looked back. I think realistically he could have just been hampered by the hamstring injury for most of last season, and you're seeing a little bit of a return to form. I still like Bashal Tutin's role going forward. It's obviously going to have to ramp up a lot, especially with LaQuint Allen receiving some passing down reps. I think Trevor Lawrence will be fine as well. I think BTJ will still have a lot of huge spike weeks, and I expect this upcoming one to be one of those. On the Panther side of things, I thought Chuba looked really good on the ground. I was impressed by Tet in his debut, made a lot of challenging catches. Separation wasn't totally there, but that's kind of what you're used to getting with a guy like him. But yeah, it kind of made me hopeful about his stock going forward, even in an offense that might not be that great.
All right. On to the next one here. We have the Steelers versus the Jets. The quite literal and opposite of what Vegas and I expected to happen here. And it went from being the projected lowest scoring game to the highest scoring game, or at least next to what we had prior to the Bills and Ravens game. Biggest kind of boost here is that they just had high scoring offenses. I don't really know what to make of Kenneth Gainwell being a heavily utilized here. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then, yeah, I mean, Breece Hall looks great. It seems to kind of be his role entirely here. But the snap share, albeit, is not the sexiest thing in the world either. So curious to hear what you guys have to take on this specific game here, though.
Yeah, I'd be tentatively, a little bit optimistic about Breece Hall. He looked really good despite the snap share. I mean, game one is always kind of a proving ground, especially when you have as good of a backup as like Braylon Allen behind you. So I think it should increase, maybe even as close as the next game. But I think Justin Fields really pleasantly surprised me. Like as far as fantasy goes, I think he's going to be a competent guy that if you're kind of worried about your quarterbacks on your team, you want to consider adding if he hasn't already been added to another team in your league. Yeah, DK looked really good too. DK is a guy I had some concerns about. Seemed to connect pretty well off the bat with Aaron Rodgers. So nice job if you drafted him. I mean, that could explode eventually because of A-Rod, but.
All right. Ray, you have anything on this one, or we move on to the next one?
No, I think you touched on it pretty well. Was just kind of impressed with how both offenses looked. I think this was easily the lowest total of the week heading in, and I think that definitely was not the case in this one. We'll see how that holds up. I don't know that I expect either of these offenses to continuously put up 30 for most of the season. I would be shocked, actually. But yeah, I would say my biggest takeaway was probably in the Brees Hall game. I thought he looked like he had a lot of that burst back that we were used to seeing when he was most successful. Obviously, the red zone touches are probably going to go to Braylon Allen in a decent amount of situations, but he still looked really good running the ball, and I think that definitely a great flex play.
All right, on to the next one here. We have the Giants versus the Commanders. Biggest takeaway for at least the short term, Debo is the wide receiver one. I think that's primarily due to the fact that we see a lot of these alpha receivers when they miss time for training camp, they just get off to a slower start. So that's part of why we're seeing an increase in usage for Debo. But I also am very excited to see what we have for him in this upcoming game. With that said, Terry's a technical buy low, but I wouldn't be going too crazy for it. I do think it's worth paying more of a premium for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt because he looked awesome. And very excited to kind of see what we get there. On the other side of the ball, though, I think we're going to be getting Jackson Dart sooner than later. Hopefully, it's when Andrew Thomas is actually healthy, because then he's going to actually have a chance to not get killed, which would be great. But that's really the only takeaway I have there, aside from Abdul Carter pretending he's closing out a three-pointer on a base.
That was funny.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, JCM is obviously going to get a lot of the hype in this one. I wouldn't fully buy in just yet. Broke one long run. I wasn't overly impressed outside of that. I mean, still, obviously, they trust him to get a lot of carries early on, which is probably the most exciting portion of this whole thing, because that role is probably only going to grow unless he does something to cause a decline. But yeah, it was obviously a exciting debut. I think Neighbors will be better. Every time he seems to chirp the offensive coaches there in New York, it seems to flip in his way in the target share world. So I would expect a much bigger game. Tyrone Tracy with this current O-line might just not really be a guy. I don't know if you can trust any of these running backs unless he gets more involved in the pass catching realm, but it's something to keep an eye on, I guess.
Yeah, I personally, it's hard to kind of speculate on JCM right now, but I mean, I do think it's going to look a lot like this, with the exception of Jeremy McNichols, Eckler getting, half the snaps, getting most of the receiving work, regardless of how good JCM is. So, I mean, I think it's going to go up from here, but yeah, that's pretty much all I would add.
All right, on to the next one here. Make sure I didn't scroll too far. Good. All right, so we have the Titans versus the Broncos here. Trying to think of the best takeaways here. So what's interesting to me is Alec Imanor actually had a much higher first read rate than Calvin Ridley. Some people draw that to overall coverage schemes. I think that is more than fair. But I also think that's because maybe he's just an undervalued talent. That could be particularly interesting. You wouldn't really expect a rookie to have this little snap share anyways at this point in time either, which is also very thought-provoking. And he was going against a very, very good corner as well, and that John Barron for a bit of that contest. But with that said, the Broncos have the best defense. They were thoroughly carrying that contest, because if Bo Nix did that, I feel like against any other team this season that wasn't bottom tier, they are getting decimated. He was abysmal. But with that said, he did find his college buddy, that Torrey Franklin, a few times, so I think he's kind of interesting in deeper formats, because of their whole entire connection from the past. Harvey had a really good breakaway, which was really fun to watch. J.K. Dobbins is the kind of lead running back to have right now of those two, though. But that's kind of the main gist there. And, Cortland Sutton looks great. But you'll basically be playing a lot of rotation at receiver. And even if you're thinking about holding on to Evan Ingram, I would just drop him. He's not really worth rostering, in my opinion, just because he's also going to be in a rotation. Adam Troutman. But on to you guys here.
I would add that there's probably going to be a little bit more ramp up here for RJ Harvey, but still pretty confident that he's going to assume a much larger snap share as the season goes on. But Dobbins looks good for now based on the work he got. He looked good with the 16 carries he did have and the receptions. But also, Evan Ingram kind of is unfortunately looking obsolete. Troutman seems to be getting a lot more work than kind of anticipated based on just the Broncos signing Evan Ingram. But you might need to be moving off of him. That's pretty much what I would add.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying not to overreact. I think the Titans defense is a pretty good unit, all things considered. This game will probably age better than it looked live. I was pretty impressed with Cam Ward. It's a super hard debut to make against arguably the best defense in the NFL. I think he'll figure it out. I think he'll put some more touch on some of his passes, and the receivers will be more on the same page than they were in this one. Tony Pollard could be a bit worrying if the game scripts continue to look like this. I think the Titans are going to be a bad team, and it's hard to play from behind as a running back. And then the Denver offense, I think it'll figure itself out in a lot of ways. Cortland Sutton still looked good. Bo Nix, never been the biggest believer in Bo Nix, but I think it'll look better than it did this weekend. He's not as bad as that looked. And I was pleasantly surprised with J.K. Dobbins.
You're not a believer? That's my favorite thing.
I've never been a believer, but last year it made me question my beliefs. But this was the right way to start off the year. But we'll see.
We'll see. All right, on to the next one here. So I just find the nickname Believe pretty entertaining. All right, we got the Texans versus the Rams. Kind of went how I expected. The offensive line was just abysmal. I did think it was very interesting that Nick Chubb actually had an over 4 yards per carry, which was one of the very few people to do that this weekend. So I don't know, at least food for thought there. Stroud, he was just constantly getting pressured in the backfield, though it felt like the offensive line just couldn't really hold itself together. Nico Collins kind of suffered because of that, and then it's just clearly a rotation for who's wide receiver 2, with Xavier Hutchinson leading it. I do think it's a little bit interesting that Cade Stover had more snaps than Dalton Schultz. You get a little bit of an Ohio State connection going there. Justin Watson getting some shine, classic. Devontae Adams, and the only reason Puka had a smaller snap share was because he was just being slaughtered every other play, but kept coming back in there. I mean, targets per route run is absolutely insane. 11 targets on 22 routes run. That just numbers right there for you. I mean, pretty exciting if you're a Puka Nacua owner, but that's my biggest takeaway from this. And all those people who are hyping up Blake Corum and Jarvis Hunter are currently in shambles, saying,
did Cade Stover get hurt? I feel like I saw that.
He could have, but I'm not entirely sure.
But yeah, that's interesting to see. I don't really have much to add besides what you said. A huge Puka stan, so give it to you, Grant.
Yeah, I mean, this game was just kind of ugly. It was hard to really find anything super valuable from this one, other than the fact that Puka, I think if injuries were not a scenario, he would probably be a top 3 or 4 fantasy pick. I mean, the target share is unbelievable. The connection there is great. He seems to always find his way in the end zone and in impactful spots. I think if you knew Stafford was always going to be healthy and that Puka was going to find a way to stay healthy, which has been an issue in his career, he's as reliable of a receiver as you can find. The target share is pretty much consistent in every game he's played on the Rams. On the Texans side of things, I mean, Stroud didn't look particularly great, which then therefore led to Nico Collins not really having a great game, but I need to see more from it. I'm not going to write off that duo just yet. I think the Rams pass rush is a good unit, and the Texans did trade their best offensive lineman in the offseason, which obviously is going to lead to some extra pressure. So we'll see how this ages, but my opinion on Stroud and Collins hasn't changed all that much.
All right, on to the next one. We have the 49ers versus the Seahawks here. I mean, the 49ers are falling apart from injury. I'm not sold that Zach Charbonnet is actually going to be truly splitting this much work with Kenneth Walker. I think Kenneth Walker might be continuing to deal with something here. And once he's fully removed from it, then we probably will get more Kenneth Walker touches. But that's kind of my main takeaway for this one.
Yeah, I would say it was pretty. I'd be happy if you're a Charbonnet owner after this one, just based on how the usage worked out. I think it's probably going to look a lot more skewed to the Charbonnet side as the season goes on there. So be wary of that if you're a K9 owner. Other than that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super excited if I own either of them, really. They're both kind of like a handcuff for the other one. I don't really see either of them being unreal until the other one unfortunately gets injured for a week or two. Like if you have both of them, you're secretly kind of hoping that one of them gets dinged up a little bit because that's the only way that the other one is going to be crazy relevant in my eyes. JSN looked fantastic. Really their only threat offensively in this game. Darnold had like 160 passing yards. JSN had 130 of those. So that's super exciting. And yeah, I'm be interested to see what the Niners offense looks like after some of these extra injuries with Kittle out. Will it be Jake Tongus? Will it be like Luke Farrell? Who knows? But I feel like they're schemed well enough to find a way to win games even without some of those guys. So I'd probably just give an uptick to Pearsall and see what happens this week.
All right, on to the next one here. We have the Packers versus the Lions. I mean, I'm just not going to take too much away from one game. Like, I think the Packers had a pretty good offseason and might just be undervalued by the market in terms of like their true contention odds for the Super Bowl. Your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to see more passing from the Packers just to kind of see how that wide receiver room is going to shake out as far as the usage goes before I jump to any conclusions there, kind of like you're saying. I mean, Tucker Kraft obviously looks like he's going to be a mainstay in that offense, which is awesome for his owners. On the Lions side of things, yeah, I don't know. That one Tesla catch was kind of sick. Other than that, not a ton of takeaways.
Yeah, the Ben Johnson effect might be real. I don't want to give up on them too early, but the offense looked like a shadow of itself from a year before. They averaged like over 30 points a game last year. This week, put up 7 points in garbage time. Outside of that, offense looked pretty gross. Laporta's target share was interesting. Obviously, he had the most targets outside of Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs' targets were gross. I think he had 10 catches for like 22 yards, which is the lowest amount of yards for a 10-catch game ever. I think they'll probably find a way to get guys more involved in some explosive plays early on in this next game against the Bears, but definitely not the kind of debut you wanted to see if you were a guy that took Jahmyr in the top 5 and Amon-Ra in the top 10 somewhere. So I guess the jury's still out. We'll have to see what it looks like as this offense grows.
We have the Ravens versus the Bills here. I mean, this was just like
the Inger.
I don't really have any true takeaways. I think Keon Coleman was fine, but I also think it was a bit game script dependent because of like how much he was needed. Like, I'm not sold he's actually going to be that fantasy relevant on a consistent basis. But
yeah, he had 90 of his yards in the second half or in the fourth quarter of this game, which that's just not going to happen again. I think the biggest takeaway you can take, which I'm also pro Keon Coleman going forward, is just the amount of targets in those situations when they needed to find a guy. He seemed to be the first target, the first read in a lot of situations. This game in general, though, I feel like I'm just going to probably throw out the box score of this one because it was just so much played on tilt that it was hard to take too much away from it. Like, the fantasy performances were just insane, and based on the script of the game, it seemed like no defense was ever going to get a stop. So it was kind of just like if you played a game where the offense was on max settings and the defense was on like 0 sliders, and you just see what happens. And that's probably not going to be the case going forward. Zay Flowers did learn how to run straight, though, so that's big for his stock going forward. He was a big-time catch a ball, run sideways 10 yards, try to make something happen kind of guy, and it seemed like he had taken that out of his game a little bit. So I would be excited if I was a Zay Flowers owner, obviously.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would really add is that I was kind of surprised Josh Palmer saw so many looks. I kind of thought initially that was going to be a split a little bit more between him and Elijah Moore, like those looks, but we'll see how that goes. It's one game, like we said. And then Ty Johnson getting a lot of those passing downs on the Bills was interesting too. And Ray Davis is relatively zero usage. Yeah. So
I like Ty Johnson. I thought they should have used him more early on in the game. I think he was kind of a matchup breaker, but still found a way to win the game. So it doesn't really matter. But I liked his involvement.
Yeah, same.
I missed putting in the other game, my bad, but there's no real takeaways for me from the Bears, whatchamacallit.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about the debut for JJ? It definitely wasn't perfect, but at least he overcame some adversity.
Awful.
It's terrible.
Looked like the fears that were definitely there. Second half, he looked elite, and that's kind of what matters. He looked like he got a swagger and was able to control the offense and kind of wheels up from there. I guess is kind of a short note. I do think that it's interesting to see how much they are targeting Olamide Zacchaeus, but that's kind of the short-term answer for Luther Burden becoming more involved. And I think the biggest tell to me was that when they were trying to get really creative at the very end of the game, prior to the very last play where they're just like, all right, we need to chuck it down the field, so to speak, it was Luther Burden, DJ Moore, and Rama Dunze on the field was the primary. And I think Cole Kmet was out there too. So I thought that was pretty telling of when it comes down to who he's going to really trust in the end. I think Luther Burden is going to be a guy for him. But that's kind of the main gist there.
Yeah. And basically on that same note, just Cole Kmet probably going to be a factor for all you Loveland heads out there for a while. It's Caleb seems pretty used to targeting him. So
yeah, nothing else really to add. I thought JJ was impressive as the game went on. It was nice to see. I think a lot of people were giving up on Justin Jefferson after just a half of football. So it was nice to see some of that chaos go away as the game progressed.
All right. On to the actual games. Commanders, Packers. So are the Packers going to be missing a offensive lineman for this one or no?
I mean, it was on the other slide. They have guys that are probably going to miss this week. There's a couple guys in the secondary. They were banged up. Obviously, the receiving core has kind of been in and out of practice, but it seems like they're all going to play. I'm interested to see what the practice report looks like as it comes out today in the last day of practice before they take on the Commanders in this one. I think Matthew Golden's going to play. I think Jaden Reed is probably going to play through that same injury and probably not practice, just show up and play. On the Commander side of things, I saw that Eckler came off the injury report fully and is full go for this game. Not that really matters all that much, but it could take away some potential pass catching work that JCM would have received otherwise. I like the Packers in this game. Probably a Josh Jacobs game. It's too hard to read with their receiving room. There's too many guys that can catch the ball and get open to really target any pick-em lines or anything like that in this one for the receiving core.
I think maybe Kraft you could target
that's one.
Yeah.
To me, the three receivers are all kind of similar at this point. I think Golden will probably emerge one of these weeks. It's just hard to target that week in advance and really get ahead of it. You're probably going to have to wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm just going to be on the Commanders side. I don't think they should be this much of dogs. I just think the offensive firepower on the Commanders is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a banger, I guess is kind of the short summary I have.
Agreed.
The game of the week in theory. And if Zach Tom doesn't play, then I like the Commanders that much more. But on to the next one, Jaguars, Bengals. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is awful. It's kind of the big part of this that sucks. Because we can either have a banger or T-Law continues to suck. So I'm going to play into the side of this hopefully being a banger, in which case it could be high scoring. But I'm kind of curious your guys' thoughts on the defensive side of this. Is there, I guess, I don't know. What do you guys, see here more than anything?
I was impressed by the Jaguars' defense in week one, and the Bengals definitely struggled offensively. And I think this might not be the pushover that some are seeing it as. I think the Jaguars' defense could stand up to them a little bit, make things hard on the Bengals early on yet again. I like the Jags in this game, potentially to come out of here with a win even. But I think it'll be a game for BTJ to figure it out. Bengals secondary didn't look all that impressive. You could even get involved with Brenton Strange. He was a guy that I've been looking at in the last few days. Obviously, Fannin ate the Bengals alive, and Strange is a different profile of tight end, but he's still a guy that they trust in the offense, and I could see this being a pop week for him. But yeah, most Jaguars pass rushers I'm pretty interested in.
Yeah, I don't got much to add for this one.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think you can make an argument for Etienne as a strong start candidate as well for this week. Chase Brown have a much better week and not going against Myles Garrett. And forgot who the other Michigan man was, but I'm sure Grant can remind us. All right.
Who?
Didn't they draft a defensive tackle from Michigan?
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. Giants versus Cowboys. I mean, I'm kind of expecting this to be a little bit more of a banger. I think both the secondaries aren't particularly the greatest thing in the world, in which case, like, I don't know. I really like George Pickens for this week.
Yeah.
High projected team total for Dallas. I do expect the Giants to have Malik Neighbors keep them in this game, hopefully. And who knows? Maybe George Pickens goes crazy. But that's kind of my main gist for this specific game. It's sad to see that Andrew Thomas is not back yet.
Yeah, I think I definitely echo the Pickens point. I'd say Ferg is also probably a good look this week based on what we saw last week, and just his connection with Dak. But should be a banger. I think the Giants have a chance to win this one, honestly, which is probably what's going to make it a banger. I mean, maybe we'll see some more, or we'll see it, become a little bit more one-sided in the Giants running back room. I know it was like basically split between Singletary and Tracy, and then like a little bit of usage for Scatabo, but yeah, it should be a fun one.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think Scatabo is probably just short yardage kind of guy for now.
All right. Bears, Lions. I mean, currently they're just giving DeAndre Swift a lot more touches than we expected, so I think he's strong. I really like David Montgomery here, just because if it is a run-positive game script, he should be able to feast in this type of situation. Really good bounce-back spot for the Lions, in my personal opinion. Really good time to start JMO as well, in theory. Curious your guys' thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a spot where the Lions could probably return to form a little bit. The Bears' defense lacked a lot of things in that second half. And hopefully Jahmyr Gibbs can get things going early in this one. It seemed like when they got behind immediately, it was tough for the Lions to cope with that because of their plan and reliance on running the ball, which seemed like they were going to commit to early on in that game. And there just wasn't really a place for it after they fell down early. So I think you'll see a different situation here where they can kind of use a positive game script and kind of just rely on their guys to lean on the Bears front seven as this game goes on. So I'm big on the Lions running back room in this one, and potentially JMO. I feel like the Bears had some lapses in coverage where you could see a deep threat guy getting open in a lot of those plays and see him get rolling after the extension.
Yeah, I think they're being in my opinion, at least, I agree with Wells. This is a good bounce back spot. I think they're being kind of generous to the Bears, the spread here. I think more than likely, at least by the end of that first half, they'll be playing from behind. So I think it's a decent bounce back spot for DJ Moore to get some more looks and maybe some deeper looks in this one too. From last game, even though that connection between him and Caleb didn't look amazing, just because of Caleb mostly, not because of DJ Moore, but yeah, decent bounce back spot if you're a Moore owner, I think.
All right. On to the next one here. Rams, Titans. I kind of like taking the Titans here. I don't really expect the Rams offensive line to be super healthy, in which case it could be a bit of a surprise, kind of underdog that a lot of people wouldn't be expecting. But I don't know. I didn't think Cam Ward looked terrible in week one, but we'll see. What do you guys think?
I think this is yet another front that's going to be tough to cope with. I think that Jared Verse will probably have his way in a lot of these matchups and will be in Cam Ward's face. But after seeing it one time, I think he can make the right adjustments. I liked Cam Ward's debut a lot. Rams secondary is a little less scary too. Well, anything's less scary than the Broncos secondary. So I think you could find some room for Ridley into a lineup this week for sure. Not sure if I'm big on Tony Pollard this week. And Kyren Williams, kind of the same thing. The Titans' run D looks pretty good in a lot of scenarios. So probably staying away from the running backs, going with some pass catchers in this one.
Yeah, I'd pretty much agree with you guys.
All right. Patriots, Dolphins. I mean, like the spreads indicating here, it's just interesting to see the Dolphins are favorites. And I think a lot of people will be very quick to take the Patriots in this one. And I think for good reason, too, for what it's worth. They lost more offensive linemen. They're now on to like their fourth string cornerbacks. Like, lots of reason to like the Patriots here. But it does make me question more than anything, why is Miami favored? Like, that just seems odd. I don't know. I think it's at least worth looking at Jalen Waddle in this matchup if he really is kind of the guy getting the boosted usage, and if they are without Christian Gonzalez for the Patriots. I'd like to think he's one of the larger benefactors. I think if you get I think like Achan could be a really fun player on PredictionStrike for the Sparks plays in the event that like he has a lower projection than what we're expecting. But what do you guys expect here?
Yeah, I love all the pass catchers in this game on the Dolphins side and on the Patriots side as well. Dolphins secondary looked horrendous. This could be a big Hunter Henry game. You saw what Tyler Warren was able to do early and often against the Dolphins in week one. I expect Butte to kind of continue the strong start he had. And then also, if you can build off that, I think Ramondre is probably the running back that has the biggest upside in this game. Well, probably not upside, but I like his floor in this game. The Dolphins' run defense on kind of just up the middle carries with Jonathan Taylor looked really bad, and Ramondre is going to be more the guy that's going to punish you in those type of areas. So whether you're looking at it as a pick 'em play or a flex play if he falls in the end zone or something, I could easily see that coming into fruition. On the Dolphin side of things, I like Achan as a pass catcher. I don't think he's going to have any success in the run game. I think the Patriots' front seven is really good, and Achan isn't the greatest tackle breaker in terms of like head-on collisions. But if they get creative, work him out of the backfield in screens and running Texas routes and wheel routes and things like that, where he's really successful, could be a big game. I think this one could be sneaky high scoring too. I kind of like this game as a potential fun fantasy matchup.
Jackson, you're on mute here.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm not pass catchers on both sides of the Dolphins. I'm expecting a decent week from Tyreek Hill, especially. Yeah, I think Grant kind of said it perfectly. I mean, we saw it last week. It's probably going to happen again this week. Achan is going to be involved in a ton of passing plays. He's obviously going to have a lot of carries, but we'll see how that goes against this Patriots defensive line. But bet the Dolphins. I mean, come on. 1.5 over the Pats. They suck. Let's go.
I like it. On the next one here. 49ers, Saints. I mean, it's more of a question of like who's actually going to be starting for the 49ers. I think this could be a sneaky spot to take the Saints. I think they're very undervalued by the market here and could just be kind of a fun dog to be taking in a matchup that's going to be pushing a lot of rookies to be playing in the defensive rotation for the 49ers. So we'll kind of see how it plays out. I don't mind taking the dog here. I think that realistically, like, if you are in a Spark or playing any Sparks on PredictionStrike, you have to use Christian McCaffrey. The amount of touches he's going to have this week is going to be insane. He will be the whole entire offense because of the amount of injuries that they've gone through. But what do you guys think for this one?
Fully agree. I do kind of think the Saints are live in this one, like you said, with the injuries on the Niners side. The Niners defense did look more impressive than I was expecting after they lost so many guys in free agency. A couple guys to the Broncos. They lost Travarius Ward as well, I believe, to the Colts. But just a different defense than what we're used to seeing. But they've always done a good job of just kind of plugging guys in to those spots when they've lost important playmakers in the past. So I think this could be a week where Spencer Rattler is a bit in hell. But I do think that the Saints defense is capable of not getting absolutely blown out by a banged-up Niners team. I don't want to make any predictions on this one until we see Brock Purdy's status, because if it's Mac Jones, Mac Jones, it could be worse. There are worse backups out there, but it would be definitely a matchup that I approach with more caution with him at the helm. But that could lead to even more McCaffrey. So that's probably the constant here.
Who's the backup tight end for the Niners?
What is his name?
Like
Tongus?
Yeah. That
Jake
could be
Tongus?
That could be a fun look this week, Loki.
For sure.
All right. On to the next one here. Bills, Jets. What to make of this one? I really do expect the Bills to kind of just dominate here. If they were able to do that to the Ravens, I just have a hard time seeing the Jets to be able to keep up to that pace, if you will. I do think Brees could be a very kind of fun play just because of how well he ran and how many touches he had. But I'm curious to see what you guys like here. I honestly don't really expect this to be as competitive as the line is indicating.
No, I agree. That total is a little high too. I think that's a little bit of a reaction based on two teams that played crazy games in week one. I think the Jets defense will probably come correct in this one a bit, and this could easily be a lower scoring game that's a little more cagey. I don't think the Jets offense is going to look like it did last week consistently. And as good as the Bills are, I just expect a little bit of a regression from that kind of chaotic display we saw Sunday night. This one feels more like a 24-17 type of game, something like that. I think the Bills probably get it done, but I would look more at some running back. Some James Cook probably in this one. The Jets secondary will figure it out. They won't be as bad as they were last week.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly kind of like the over in this one. Like, it was at 45.5 like a day ago. Seems like it's trending up even a little bit as we're getting closer to the game. But I don't know. I mean, that Bills game was an 80-point game. Like, I don't think we need to expect that from them. The Jets looked a million times more electric against, a respectable defense than we thought they would. So, I mean, I think it's a decent position. I could easily see it going over 46.5. What do you think of Wells? Which side of that are you on? Under or over? Yeah.
I'd probably lean a little bit more towards the under just because it's like in theory, it should be more run dominant.
Yeah.
Maybe just this new gen of mobile quarterbacks with running backs leads to higher scoring game scripts than we're expecting, and that could be why it's there. But all right, on to the next one here. Seahawks, Steelers. I expect it to be more true to its total, but given what happened last week, probably going to be a lot higher scoring than I'm expecting. I don't really have any thoughts because it's not a game I'm interested in any sense of the word. I think the running back situations are both really murky. JSN's target share is elite because Cooper Kupp sucks. Maybe we see some more Torrey Horton. But overall, I do expect this to be a very low-scoring game. I don't really expect the Steelers to do much either here. I think Seattle is a very live dog. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's probably going to regress back down, and obviously the books think that with the 39.5-point total. I don't have much to add besides what you said, honestly. I want to see if Calvin Austin kind of gets the same amount of work this week against the Seahawks defense, because that's someone I've been looking at. But otherwise, interested in Aaron Rodgers and see if he can kind of keep this, little spark he has going on offense alive.
I think it's a spot for the Seahawks offense to figure it out a little bit. They just looked super out of sync and disjointed in week one, and I feel like this is a spot with a team that just gave up a lot of points. Obviously, the Steelers' defense will be better. They're not going to be that bad, but I think it's a time for guys not named JSN to step up and figure it out. He'll probably get the Jalen Ramsey coverage for most of this game, and we'll see how Kupp and some extra pass catchers can cope with that.
All right, on to the next one here.
I guess it should be a game for Kenneth and Charbonnet. As little as we hyped them up going into this one, the Steelers' run D looks really bad. So in theory, it could be a spot where one of them bursts through.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of wait it out and we'll see how these games, if they continue to be higher scoring or not. All right, Browns, Ravens. I mean, I don't really expect the Browns to do anything here. Could they keep it a little more competitive? Sure. But it really should just be the Ravens dominating. I would honestly be pretty surprised if they don't. Maybe you see an issue because of the defensive front, but I don't know. The Ravens look really freaking good. They just were on the opposite side of variance is all that really happened there. If you give the Ravens another drive to go down and score, I think they score.
Yeah. Agreed. The Ravens will be just fine. This will be more of a return to what we're usually seeing out of them, where they probably take a lead and actually succeed in running down the clock with their run game. It's a run game that's as hard to stop as I've ever seen, and I expect that to be the story of this one.
Yeah, I think the Browns receivers could be fun in this one, just with the 11.5-point spread and the kind of, relative to the other parts of the Ravens system, the secondary isn't amazing. So that's pretty much what I would add is look at what Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy do this week.
Yeah, I mean, Harold Fannin, if anything.
And Fannin, yeah.
I decided to pull the trigger. I know it's losing money, but I took 75-1 for offensive rookie of the year. See if anything happens there. You never know.
It's a banger.
Broncos versus Colts. I mean, this is like scheme dependent, great for RJ Harvey, funnily enough, but like I don't think he's going to get that many more touches this week. I expect like 2 more touches, maybe. But it should be the J.K. Dobbins show. With that said, they're not that much of favorites here, which I think is kind of interesting. Like, I think Daniel Jones isn't undervalued. Don't get me wrong, but like the defense that the Broncos have, I think is honestly in another tier. Like it is a Super Bowl caliber defense, at least in my opinion. And I'm kind of curious to hear your guys' thoughts in response to that specifically. But I think the Broncos are going to just win a lot of games just through how good their defense is. So I'm not really that interested in a lot of the receiving options or just any of the options on the opposite side of the ball. Maybe like Cortland Sutton and Dobbins are the only ones I'm really looking at here personally, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, I think Warren could still be a good look in this game, but I totally agree. And I think Denver is a really good look. It's just like an outright winner of this game. I think they're like, I mean, it's -1.5 odds. It's way too close considering, if you zoom out on Daniel Jones, you zoom out on the Colts, like what they've looked like. So, yeah, I'd agree with that. Not much to be excited for on the Colts front. Hopefully Bo Nix picks it up a bit from a fantasy production standpoint. But I do like Warren. Like, I feel like they're going to have to lean on Warren if the Broncos defense does what it should be expected to do.
Yeah, this is kind of the hardest game to predict based on overreactions from week one because the Broncos offense looked bad and the Colts looked really good. But I think the Broncos are a team that has more juice going forward this season and is a team I'm more excited on long term. Their defense is really good. It could be a rude awakening for Daniel Jones. And then we'll have to try not to overreact to that performance going into week 3, and it'll be a whole thing. But I think running backs in this one, probably Dobbins are my sole and main play in this one.
Mm-hmm. All right. On to the next one here. Panthers, Cardinals. I mean, kind of fun bounce back spot for the Panthers because I don't know. I think they could generally just be better than what we're expecting. I do expect the Cardinals to win this one because of how poor the Panthers defense is. But at the same time, like this Cardinals team did just compete very well with the New Orleans Saints. And who knows, maybe the Saints are better than what we're giving them credit for. But it gives me interest, at least, in the Carolina Panthers here. I think it could be a fun bounce back spot. But I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on this respective matchup.
Yeah, I didn't think the Panthers looked too good, but I mean, it's one game. Like, could have been an anomaly game, but this is another one where it's just like you're judging based on game one overreaction because the Cardinals played against the Saints, who suck, and the Saints actually didn't look that horrible against them. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm probably not going to be touching this game in like any facet. But what do you think, Grant?
I like James Conner a lot in this matchup. He's probably the sole guy I'm targeting. Panthers defense against receivers looked good. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence was just bad as well, but J.C. Horn was able to keep BTJ in check, which I think will probably be the case for the Cardinals pass catchers. I like Conner a lot, though, just to pound the rock. The Jaguars did a great job of running the ball in that game, and this feels like a situation for a guy that's used to being a workhorse, taking 20-plus carries and kind of dominating the ground and the pace of this game.
All right. I'm actually kind of curious. Trey Benson or James Conner, who do you think has a bigger day against the Panthers in the running game?
James
Conner. But I think if this game gets a little bit out of hand or it's up 2 scores, like you'll see both of them mixed in and they'll just pound the rock. But I still have Conner as a huge play this week.
Okay, good. I was just kind of curious, more food for thought, to see what we can kind of get there. Eagles versus Chiefs. To be honest, it's probably going to be a game that sucks more than we care to admit. I don't expect Saquon to do a lot here just because that is what we saw last time these two went off. Like, yeah, he had some big runs, but that's kind of Saquon's profile, to be honest with you. Chiefs run game, I don't really expect to be much. I don't expect the pass game to be particularly efficient. I think we saw what happened. Like the Eagles, have a pretty decent pass defense themselves and pride themselves on team chemistry and the way they build, so that these players become even better than typically what they should be. It's just going to be a good game. I just think it's going to be really boring. I honestly think the total should probably be closer to 42.5. But curious to hear your guys' thoughts here.
I kind of agree. I think the Chiefs' run D looked really good against Hampton in week one. That was kind of the main unit that stuck out to me as being super solid from KC. I'm lower on the Chiefs this year than I have been in the past, and that kind of showed itself in week one. Passing game struggled a bit in the first half. Mahomes made a few really, really nice throws in the second half. I think he'll be just fine. But in terms of fantasy relevance, there's nobody that I really love in this one outside of maybe an AJ Brown. Basically, just whoever doesn't get the McDuffie matchup, I feel like will have a big game. The Chiefs secondary didn't look great in week one at all. You saw three guys have super fantasy relevant games. So I would look at some Eagles pass catchers, but that's probably about it.
Do you think it'll be DT that gets McDuffie?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I guess we could look at Super Bowl matchups and things like that to kind of make a judgment call on them. But I mean, even when he was on guys, unless I think in week one, he was kind of mixing up who he was covering, and the other side got a lot of the targets, whether it was Keenan or Ladd. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you could see a lot of work out of the slot because that's primarily where Keenan was working out of in week one, and he had a huge target share. But yeah, even that's hard to thread the needle in this one, but I would say one of those pass catchers will probably have a big game. I think this feels like an under, though, with that line. That's probably my biggest takeaway. I feel like we talked a lot about defenses and things, and
I also think
that would be my.
I don't know if I'm tripping, but this kind of feels like a decent spot for the Eagles to lose. Like Chiefs coming off of that week one loss, looking to get their get back. Like I could see the Chiefs upsetting here, but yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I do have a question. So if Brock Purdy weren't to play, do you think the 49ers should be favorites?
Good question. I mean, Mac Jones, Spencer Rattler probably Spencer Rattler with his weapons, honestly, might deserve to be like a half-point favorite.
The reason I ask that is because they're currently plus 140, and Shanahan says it's a long shot that Purdy plays Sunday, and it could be a multiple week.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I think that's a decent shout.
I'll chase the line movement. Why not? I think they'll close as favorites potentially because you just have so many rookies playing on that defense.
Yeah,
it'll end up closer. But if not, you can always cash out for the even out. All right, Falcons versus Vikings, the Sunday night game. What's this? Back-to-back primetime showings for the Vikings. Pretty exciting for your Michigan guy there, Grant. That is JJ McCarthy. It should be a pretty good matchup here. I am curious to hear your ball-knowing takeaway of the Falcons kind of defense from like a pressure standpoint, if you have one. Just because it's like I know James Pierce Jr. was a very controversial trade. The reality is they did overpay for him, but like I do think the talent is there. But like I don't know. I'm curious to hear your takeaway with this one. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as even this spread kind of indicates. I think it'll also be closer to like 41.5, 42.5.
Yeah, I think the Falcons defense looked a lot better in week one than it did last year. I mean, those Penix starts last year were shootouts. There's a lot of like 30-30 games and things like that. Already in week one, they looked better. Obviously gave up a late touchdown, but outside of that, I thought they held the Buccaneers in check pretty well. I think their secondary looked good. Obviously, you let Egbuka sneak through for 2 touchdowns, but they kept Mike Evans somewhat quiet. And Egbuka only had like 2 catches outside of that weren't super impactful. So as long as they can limit some of those big plays, I feel like I like where their defense is, and it's in a much better spot than it has been in the past. I do think this is probably an easier matchup for JJ, all things considered, at least just with him going in with the confidence of getting that first start out of the way and being able to just kind of use and build off of what he found in the fourth quarter of that game. I kind of like the Falcons in this one. I liked where Penix looked in that game. I thought he looked great. He was super poised, was careful with the ball, did a good job of finding his spots and taking his moments to scramble and when to throw the ball. I thought he did a great job commanding that offense, and I'm pretty high on the Falcons this year based off of that and kind of some of the defensive upgrades we've seen so far. The main guys I'm probably targeting in this one, I mean, Bijan will have a good day, but he's not a guy that I like at all in this matchup. The Vikings' run D looks really, really good. Probably maybe like an Aaron Jones play, someone like that. I do think it's a spot where TJ Hawkinson could have some success, or some of the secondary pass catchers. I think the Falcons, in the past at least, have kind of blanketed wide receiver ones, and JJ is obviously Justin Jefferson is obviously a guy that can fight through some of those matchups, but it's still not like a scheme you love. So I think some secondary pass catchers for the Falcons, maybe a Mooney if he's the only guy, is probably like a must play. If Drake London ends up playing, he's also a guy I like. But yeah, nothing I'm super passionate about.
Kyle Pitts.
Could totally be.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was really impressed with last week was Penix looked good on a ton of passing volume, which was awesome to see, like in game one. So I'm excited about the Falcons pass catchers here against this Viking defense. Yeah, pretty much that. Other than that, buy a ticket to the game in Minnesota. Damn, $118 for an NFL ticket.
Facts. I think if Penix can get the ball out quickly, they'll have some success. It's just like a defense that when you're not used to seeing it can be a brutal one. They throw crazy looks at you, will entirely switch a look of a play while you're already out there lined up. So it's not an easy one for a young quarterback, as we saw last week, and I would just be a little bit worried about that. But if they have the right game plan and he can come out and slinging the ball, getting it out quickly, I like it as well.
All right, on to the next one. Buccaneers versus Texans. Another game I honestly expect to be pretty low scoring. Just Texans defense is pretty damn sick. Like, if it's not the Broncos, I think Texans might be taking the helm for the best defense. I can't remember. Did Stingley go out of the game or did he stay in?
I think he's fine. He's not on injury reports going forward. I don't know about that particular game, but he'll play in this one. Okay, so I think I like Nico, and that's about it in this one. I think it's a spot where you can figure it out. The Buccaneers corners aren't super scary, but I think this could be a tough one for Evans and Egbuka. The Texans secondary is loaded with guys. It could be a Bucky Irving game. That's probably their best chance to really affect this one offensively, or just finding chunk plays and kind of just piecing together a gross game. But Nico's the main guy. Like,
do we think this goes under the total potentially? It's kind of low.
It's a low total, so it's hard to say. But
yeah,
I think this could easily be a 17-13 type of game. I don't know. It's probably something I stay away from. But if I had to pick, I'd probably lean under. Yeah.
I'd expect it to be low scoring. Both the offensive lines have their own respective injuries, so I don't really expect it to be super high paced.
Yeah, I would say Bucky, and that's about it for my looks for that game.
Final game of the evening: Chargers versus Raiders. Yeah, I mean, Chargers should be great here. Herbert's looking like an MVP candidate, so kind of see how it plays out. I don't really expect this to be as competitive as the line is indicating, but perhaps you guys have a different take here.
No, I'd agree with you. I think maybe some more work from Najee in this game, like you kind of mentioned, to counteract the Marion Hampton attack. But yeah, I'd pretty much agree. I think the Chargers are going to look good in this one.
Yeah, I like Hampton as well. I feel like this could be a bit of a coming out party. I feel like a lot of the film heads were really high on his involvement in week one, and the raw numbers didn't look that good, but he was so good in the pass protection game and in the blocking game that I think he'll always find a way to find his way on the field. I think he'll be able to just kind of bruise through this defense as long as the game script is right. I do think this game could be pretty close, but if they get any sort of two-score lead, I think Hampton will just dominate on the ground.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. Bit of a long one. We'll try to make this a little bit more efficient and figure out what to take and add and so forth moving forward. But I figured this was a stepping stone in the right direction. So appreciate Jackson and Gray coming on, chatting a little bit of ball with me today to chat through some of these games and some of the we'll continue to expand upon this, find little insights we can kind of utilize for the future. So subscribe if you've gotten to this point, invest accordingly. Until next time, appreciate you. And yeah, peace, y'all.
Peace.